Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. We will be recording this session and we will post it afterwards and we'll send a link out so that you could rewatch. And if anyone else has missed it, or if you come in late, um, you should have a Q&A function, hopefully, on Zoom. So feel free to put questions in there or the chat. Liz is on the Zoom also on my team, and she will be monitoring that as I go through a presentation and a demo. So we are very thrilled to offer you Veeva eConsent starting next week. It is built in within SiteVault. It's an alternative consenting option to paper consent and to DocuSign or RedCap consent. So you will see after the weekend that you'll have a new option within SiteVault. It will give you the ability to perform an in-person consent with electronic signatures or a fully remote consent option. Both options are compliant with FDA regulations, and you need to only configure the consent signatures one time per consent, and then you're good to use it for multiple participants. One thing that's important is just like you would get approval to use RedCap or DocuSign, approved by the IRB of record for to use for consenting, you have to get Veeva eConsent also approved. So if you have a new study or want to adapt this to an existing study, you need to submit an amendment and get it IRB approved prior to using it. So I have a test study in our sandbox. So I've logged into SiteVault. I have my IRB approval to use eConsent. I have my IRB stamped consent available to use. So in SiteVault, a few things that you want to make sure you have before you use the eConsent option is you want to make sure that it's set up with appropriate members on your study team of whoever might be performing the eConsent, and you want to make sure that they're active. Then what you would do is you would go to view study details and you would need to enable eConsent. This will automatically be disabled for all studies and you have to manually enable it. Anyone who is a site admin in SiteVault has the ability to do that. And it gives you just a message saying, are you sure you want to do that? So now that I have this enabled, so first thing I want to do is I want to build my consent that I'm going to use for eConsent. So you'll see you'll have a new tab for consent forms. You could add eConsent. You could add as many as you need. So if you have a consent and a consent addendum, or if you have a consent and a separate HIPAA authorization form, you can add as many as you need. Um, you would just do these steps for as many consents as you have, or as many attachments that you need signatures as you have. So what we're going to demonstrate today is the simpler option of what you would use if you have IRB stamped consent forms or an IRB stamped document that's a PDF. So I'm just going to click that I want the PDF-based consent. And since I don't have any uploaded right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload a new document. I'm going to pull it from my computer, the date that it was IRB approved, so the date on your stamp, and whatever language it is. So if you have translated consents, that's not an issue. You would just select whatever language is needed. And in this scenario, this is going to be my main consent form and HIPAA authorization form. And then I'm going to click Launch Editor. So it's going to take you to a new screen where you're going to be able to configure your consent. So for the purposes of this demonstration, we took one of the VCU IRB consent templates and we shortened it, and we added a few different areas on it. So if I scroll down, I'm going to see that they could consent to optional future research. So in this scenario, I want them to check check a choice, yes or no. So I have one of two options that I could do. I could either do radio buttons, which will make them check one or the other, or I have check boxes where they could select multiple. So if you have a multiple options, the check boxes would be the most appropriate. But in this scenario, I'm going to do radio buttons. So I'm going to literally just drag it exactly where I need to. Select who's going to answer it. So in this scenario, it's going to be the participant. Add a question label. So let's just say future research. It's going to default to making it required, but you can make it unrequired if or not required if you don't want it. And it's going to ask for what the first label is going to be. So yes to future research. And then it's going to automatically prompt you to add that second button. So the second button is going to be no to future research. And I'm going to save. So you have the ability to move it as you need to make it fit on the lines. You have the ability to adjust the size. So now if I want them to give an additional sample in addition to the future research, or if I have something where they need to do initials, you have the text entry box, which you just need to size accordingly to your lines. So in this scenario, this is going to be the participant. And you're going to add the label, consent to additional sample, and preview text. So if I want them to put their initials, I would write initials, which I spelt wrong. And then you could add a second one, just like the other one. But in this scenario, I'm going to make these not required because they're going to select one or the other. But I still want them to enter their initials instead. Um, okay. So in this scenario, in this consent template, we combine the HIPAA and the main consent. So we have moved it up. The VCU IRB and the privacy board are okay with the signatures being for both. The VCU IRB is in the process of updating their templates, but I just wanted to highlight how I adjusted this one to make it clear that the signature covers both, which is what's highlighted in yellow. So in this consent template, I'm going to have the patient sign. I'm going to add their printed name and the date. And all of these, you can adjust the sizes as you see fit. We have the individual obtaining consent. So I'm going to select them as a site member. and it's going to automatically apply their printed name and date for the site members. You don't need to put in the printed name because if you do, what it's going to do is it's going to tell you that you don't need to do that. In this demonstration, I'm also going to include a witness. So you would, same thing, you would just do your signature blocks and you would select whatever you need. Witness, second witness, translator, guardian, second guardian, a caregiver, proxy, whoever you may be. If you have a consent that has all the options, you could configure it for all the options, but select what is applicable for each participant. So in this one, we're going to do the witness. Okay. So now I have added in all my boxes where I needed to add in all the boxes. So I'm going to click save and exit. Um, if you have comments that you need to put in, you could put comments in of that, you added or you configured for eConsent. That is optional, as it says. And what it's going to do is it's going to save it and it's going to bring you back. It's going to redirect you back to SiteVault. So one thing that I want to point out is your document's still going to be in draft. And when you preview it here, you're not going to see any of the boxes. But if you want to double check them, or if you say, oh, wait, I missed a box, you could edit the e-consent. And if you want to preview to see what a patient's going to see, you could open the preview link. And here it's going to show you exactly what the patient is going to see. So now I wanted to take it from draft to approved for use because now I'm ready to actually consent a participant. Okay, so now my consent is all ready to go to e-consent. But before I could actually e-consent, I need to list a participant. So whatever their ID is, you would put in their ID. And when e-consent is enabled, you are required to put a first and last name so that they know who's signing. If you are doing a fully remote consent where the person is not in person, um, you will be prompted eventually to put in their email address, but for this purpose, we don't have to put that in right now. So I'm going to save this participant and I'm going to go into him because I want to add a witness. So you're going to see that we're going to have signatories. Right now, there's none listed, and it would just be the participant. But if I have a witness, I could add in my witness or my parent or whoever it may be and select what their role is. Okay. So now John Smith has a witness of Jane Smith. Okay. So now I have the option to actually start John Smith's consent whether you're in person or whether you're doing it remotely. So you'll have the option to select whichever consents you have configured for eConsent. So if you have multiple ones where you have multiple ARM consents, like ARM A, ARM B, whatever it may be, you would select whatever is applicable. And it shows because I've already added in the witness. It shows that for John Smith, John's going to sign, and Jane Smith is going to sign as the witness. So now I have the option of picking how are we consenting the patient. So you have the option to do an in-person consent, either using a device that we have at VCU. So whether it's a computer, a tablet, a VCU tablet, whatever it may be, an in-person consent using their own device, where a QR code will appear and they could scan it and it will pop up right on their phone, or if they have an iPad, or a fully remote consent. So for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to do the in-person consent. And so it's going to ask me, am I consenting using this particular device, or are we going to use a different device? For the purposes here, we're going to use this laptop. So I'm going to select who is signing now. So John Smith is, so then John Smith has a task to review and sign the consent or choose not to sign. So John Smith is going to review the consent. He is going to have to review every page and make sure that these checkboxes appear on the sides, otherwise it's not going to let him sign. If you scroll too fast, you're not going to get a checkbox. Um, so while we can't ever force them to fully read the consent, it does slow them down and ask them to review it. So, and it also tells them where they need to sign or check boxes. So on this page, yes, I want to consent to optional research. But no, I don't want to give an additional sample. So I'm going to put my initials here. And then I have a checkbox. So then I'm going to scroll down and I have to read all my pages. And now it's going to let me sign. So when it's an in-person consent, it is going to make them make their own signature. On this type of device. And it's going to autofill the rest. And they're going to submit it. So now it's going to say that John Smith is complete, but now Jane Smith needs to sign as a witness. So Jane Smith also has to review each page. If for some reason that she doesn't want to, she could click that she doesn't want to sign. Let's just say she wasn't a witness. Um, or if a participant doesn't want to consent, they have that option. So she sees that John consented to optional research, but he's not giving an additional sample, and that he has signed. So now she's going to do her signature. And it's going to auto apply that and it's going to click submit. So now, since we're using the in-person consent with a site device, they would hand the device back to us. And it will automatically route to the site staff member who sent the consent to John as the consenting staff member. So they'll immediately get a task. It'll come as an email, but it'll also just appear right here. So me as the con consenting staff member, I could see that, yeah, he consented to optional research. He's not giving an additional sample. Both have signed, looks good. I could complete it. I could sign and make it current as the consenting staff, and that could be it. Let's just say it also needs to go to the PI. I could sign and send it to route it to the PI additionally, or route it to another person if need be. So the difference when someone at VCU signs is it's going to have you sign just like you sign with DocuSign or in SiteVault. It's going to make you complete your single sign-on. Okay, so now this is a completely completed consent. The signature page for the consenting staff member, if you were to download it with a viewable rendition, it would be attached, and it also has a separate signature page, which just also looks like this that says, I, as the consenting staff member, signed it. And this is a completely valid signature. So now, if I go back to John Smith, one, I'm going to see he now has his consent that was signed. Um, and it's going to automatically file into the site binder too in SiteVault for this study. And then what it will show, and then this is ready to use for the next patient too. Oops. This is okay. So now, if you want to give John Smith a copy, you have two options. You could print out just as you would as a viewable rendition and give it to him in clinic or email it to him or however else you give them. But let's just say he doesn't want a digital copy. That's okay. So what they could do is when let me navigate back to John Smith on the main study page. He can get a digital copy through what's called My Veeva, which is a free app that Veeva has. And what you need to do is if they're interested in getting a downloaded one, we're going to generate an activation code for him and essentially download the app. He's going to have this activation code. He only has to enter it in once per study. And then any consent form that he ever signs for the study will automatically populate there. And he doesn't have to do it in clinic. He can do it at home if, let's just say, he wants to do this on his iPad instead. That's perfectly acceptable. So that is how you would do eConsent in SiteVault. So navigating back to this. So just to reiterate a few things, you could either use a VCU device that you hand to a participant. They could use their own device if they don't want to use one of our devices. If it's an in-person consent, they don't have to create any sort of account with Veeva unless they want that digital copy. Um, But as I said again, that My Viva account, if they want the digital copy, is 100% free. It works on Apple and Android, or you could use it on your laptop. It will automatically route to whatever additional signatures you have configured it, and it automatically gets filed in the study binder. And same thing with the remote consent. Once it's all completed, it'll automatically file for you and let you know that it's done. So there are just, a few things that Veeva eConsent right now cannot do. So if you need one participant to have two signatures, you unfortunately can't do that today. That is in the works, but it would be the one signature per individual role, which is why we configured our consent like we did today. As you saw, it has that additional signature page for when we sign. And if you send it to the PI, they'll get added to that signature page. It won't display on that physical consent like the patient signatures do. But they are working on configuring all this, and some of these updates you will see soon. So there are some resources that are available. So on OVPRI's Viva page, we have an eConsent SOP that is being added. It should be added by the end of the week, and it will be located under the SiteVault tab. Veeva has an eConsent help page that gives you video demonstrations, how-to instructions, and we also linked the My Viva webpage for participants to give them a little more information, but to give you an idea of what that looks like. They could access their trial documents right within it. Let me get back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So let's see what question. So I see we have a lot in the chat. Let me go through some of them. So the first question is there a situation to flag if they don't initial either option? So if it's not required, no. That is why you want to do that quality check. If you don't know their subject ID before the subject consents, I believe, which I could double check right now. But I believe we can change it if need be. Yeah, so you can change the participant ID, but you do have to enter something into the participant ID. Okay. Review again why the printed name wasn't added for the person obtaining consent. It looks like Liz answered it of the signature's automatically applied on the signature page, just not on the physical consent at this time. That is how the functionality works. And that line will remain blank when you look at it. Yeah, because we had a blank page at the end. That's why you saw me scroll past it. But I would recommend that being your last page. The date auto-populates. So yes, Viva eConsent is able to be used for assent. There are other pediatric research sites using it. You can do the two-parent signature. You can assent a participant that's under 18 as long as the IRB approves that that's a valid method for consenting them depending on their age. If the participant doesn't want to download an app, they don't have to. You just have to print out the consent at the end for it. The only time they would need to download it is if they want that digital copy of the consent saved. And then, yes, you could download a PDF um, of the signed consent form and email it to a participant if that's your process. So, when would a study choose to use Veeva over current options, REDCap or DocuSign? So REDCap is not Part 11 compliant. So if you have a study that needs to meet FDA regulations, you couldn't use REDCap. Your options would be either a paper consent or using DocuSign Part 11, or now also using Veeva eConsent. Um, so one reason why you may choose to use Veeva eConsent over DocuSign is if you're already using Veeva SiteVault for your documents, um, to help manage your study documents, what it will do is it will automatically file it into into your study binder. So that's one less step that you have to do. So just to show you guys where it ends up, you will see under participant facing, it will have the blank one, but under participants, it will have the source, informed consent. It will automatically file it. So that might be a one less step for you guys to have to do. So that's one reason why you might use Viva eConsent over DocuSign. So the option to choose for the LAR signature, there is an option to do the LAR. The option would be when you make a participant, let's just say John Smith now cannot consent for himself. An LAR would be like a proxy. Um, okay. So then so another question that came in is if you have a consent form that has options for both an LAR and an interpreter described separately, where you would only use one at a time, do you need to configure two versions of the consent in Viva? No. So you can configure it all on the same consent and then select which signatures apply for the participant. So if you have one that uses an LAR, but doesn't use a witness, you would just need to make sure that in the signatories, you have that LAR listed. If you have one where you have an interpreter, you just need to make sure the interpreter is listed or both, whatever the combination is. Um, so that looks like the last written question. Um, and I don't see any hands raised. Um, and I will double check to make sure no one has raised their hand. It doesn't look like we have anyone that has raised their hand. So if there are no other questions, um, I have included my contact information, Liz's contact information in our group email, where any of us can be reached as you're navigating SiteVault, eConsent, or anything else. As a reminder, this does this will go live next week, but if you would like to use it, you have to get approval from the IRB of record prior to using it, just like you would for DocuSign or RedCap. And we will put a pop-up message in SiteVault once it's available to use. But please make sure that you are getting IRB approval prior to using it. Seeing how no other questions have come in, I'm going to stop the recording and you guys are welcome to hop off. Liz and I will stay on for a few minutes in case anyone has any lingering questions, but we will send out a link to the recording later this week. Everyone have a good night.
Hey, Lauren.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Just a quick question. Uh, if we have approval to do a red cap consent now for a study from the IRB, but we actually haven't executed the approval, like we haven't consented anyone via, do we need to then change our IRB to say Veeva?
Um, yeah, I would recommend if you
Okay.
specifically referenced RedCap,
Yep.
that you do amend that.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Hmm.
Great. Thank you.